he is a specialist in failure. I'm not.
Hello and welcome to the Specialist in Failure podcast. Now, it has been a while since we've last spoken to you, but an unexpected development meant we suddenly had lives all of a sudden. But football certainly hasn't stopped, and it has turned possibly more evil than even we thought it to be. Joining me is my usual co-host Dan, who's currently eating. Shocker. Hello, Dan.
Hello. Yeah, I don't think you're the one to judge on eating.
Unfortunately, Dan's going to have to leave the podcast in about 5 seconds. And I want to say Callum looks different, but we have replaced him with a much better, taller, stronger, more knowledgeable model.
All right, stop kissing his ass.
I have to compliment him at some point so I can get the insults in later, Dan.
There's complimenting, then there's simping, Reece, and I think you crossed the line.
Dan, you're supposed to leave now.
No.
Welcome to the Specialist in Failure podcast, Lewis Connor.
Hello. I mean, you can keep going with the nice comments. I think it's the first time in about 4 years I've ever had one from you. So if Dan can just leave, it'll be a two-man thing. It'll be a lot better.
Yeah, I thought I'd get some in the bank ready, or making up for my past errors, or...
I'm here to interrupt the intro to say that Reece has called it, and Grimsby have conceded a 90th minute goal, and they are now losing 3-2 and going down as it stands. And I think every Stevenage fan on the planet is happy about that.
And I know some people listening may not care about Grimsby, but believe me, if you knew about Grimsby and had been to Grimsby, you'd be happy about not having to go to Grimsby. So it's a happy day for
everyone, really.
The world's a happier place without Grimsby in the Football League. So I'm usually would do an intro or a small conversation stuff. Obviously, in the past week or two, some stuff went down.
Really?
Yeah. Football went into a bit of a hellhole. Well, already was in that hellhole. So I think we're just gonna jump straight in. We're of course talking about the Super League. I wish I've thought about this for about a week, and there is no real place to start. But I'm gonna try and put it onto one of you in. Why would the big...
I'm not sure I can start without swearing many times, so I'm going to try keep that to try and keep that limited. But it's going to take great restraint on my part.
Obviously, I'm going to try and be a little bit unbiased and kind of put it from both of you. Why are the top 6 clubs, Barcelona, Juve, why did they agree to do this? I mean, we both know, we all know the main motivation, but is there any other reason? Because basically they've just exchanged, obviously they're out of it now, but they exchanged basically their souls for money, is what it looks like. Lewis, I'll go to you. Why did clubs agree? Why did this come out of the blue, and why did clubs kind of agree to it?
I just think there's multiple motivations for it. I mean, I think the first one that springs to mind for me is just the financial side of it. And we look at, obviously, the stature of a lot of the clubs. I mean, especially you look at the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas. From my knowledge, they're very heavily in debt. I think Barcelona from the top down are run so poorly, for example. And I think from there, it's also this sense of not only they have the biggest debt, but they have the biggest sort of revenue commercially, match day revenues, having the biggest stadiums. Worldwide, they've got some of the biggest fan bases, and on a sort of general scale, they are just the biggest clubs in the world. And for them to basically come together and say, if we can just drop those below us and we can create our own sort of mini, obviously, Super League, I think it was a case of, from their aspect, it was a way that they could maximize revenues, maximize money, because they thought biggest teams playing the biggest teams across the sort of Europe each week, fans would love that. And I think it was clearly a very misjudged decision because, as a Spurs fan myself, as much as I love watching us play Real Madrid or us playing Barcelona or AC Milan, I also enjoy watching us play Brighton or Burnley because we'll still get done over by them. I remember watching.
Because you show attacking football clubs. Sorry.
And I think that's another thing is
It was there.
being a Spurs fan, I don't want to be pounded 6-7-0 each week going up against the likes of Juventus, for example. That's just something that doesn't appeal to me, like myself personally. And I think it's also a case of, on the flip side, we have football fans, but we've also got matchday fans, fans that don't care about the overall game as much as the matchday experience. And us legacy fans, as they called it, are a thing of the past because they can have myself, a season ticket holder of 4 years now at Spurs and been going since the age of 4, 5. Obviously, take Old White Hart Lane, being at Wembley, the new stadium now. Like I've done numerous away days, but I will go just for the match day experience of football. Whereas they can get a legacy fan, a new fan in, rather than these legacy fans who will go into the shop and spend £100 on 2 new shirts, spend £10, £15 on food, drink, for example, as well as the match day experience, and they're going to double their money on every single fan that enters the stadium. So they're going to look at that and think, rather than put the football fan first, put the monetary value first.
I think the sad thing with COVID is it taught a lot of these clubs that they don't need fans in the stadium to survive, and the money the clubs get, most of these clubs, aren't from the fans in the stadium really, by like buying your match day program, etc. That it's coming from abroad, and they don't care who fills the stadium, do they? But this is the main kind of issue for everyone. There is one motivation, and that is it. The main motivation was money. Florentino Perez basically said, I wanted to solve our debt, so I decided to ruin everyone's league system as they knew it. And I think arguably sport as you know it, because the beauty of football is in its zero to hero rises, it's the competition, it's the integrity of you can achieve anything, and that kind of all just went away. As we said, Spurs and Arsenal are in it now. I take much more entertainment these days with watching Leicester. Who's decided this? Who decides what's a big club and what's a not? Obviously, don't get me wrong, Manchester United, etc., are huge clubs, but they're not. That isn't football. Like, this isn't a competition in which I don't care if I'm watching Leicester or Barcelona. Like, it doesn't matter to the fan, and I think we just lost that complete sense of competition, dreaming, the whole integrity of the sport. He wanted to shorten matches. Like, we have never seen such dramatic Americanization of the game.
Stupidity.
NBA, NFL are all huge franchises. They make the most money. They do. So that's clearly what's going to happen. And I think what's most painful for English fans, that legacy fans, is that we've just been essentially put a price on, and that is a hugely damaging way to go down. But I know it already existed. I mean, technically that's what the whole Premier League was, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but it's the first real evidence we've seen of owners kind of stating that fans don't matter, and that is a damaging path to lead us down.
But I think they were shut up very quickly with the way that well, they were trying to say fans don't matter, and they are the ones that shut it down. Arguably, you'd say Chelsea fans of that protest is probably the forefront for it. All just going to pot really, and I couldn't be more happy about it. And I think that just just think that just shows you can have all the money in the world, but if you've not got if you've not got everyone backing you, then
I think the problem is we've seen since clubs were allegedly, I will put that now, offered money to leave this thing by UEFA. And apparently the clubs think the problem with the Super League was the communication. The communication is not the issue with what happened. I think it's just really difficult to make them understand. And this isn't me being xenophobic against foreign owners, because you've got the Leicester owner who's absolutely understood it. Everton put out a brilliant statement against it. They're coming into
most clubs, apart from the top
look, they're
six,
coming into our country and using our football clubs as a drain, and we've accepted it, and we've accepted it for so many years. We've seen it with the Glazers since 2005. They've been taking out money out of Man United for so long. We've seen it with Levy and Enoch, their refusal to spend. We've seen it with Chelsea, they pump so much money in that they get the success to pump it back out. We've seen it since Kroenke took full control of Arsenal. These owners do not care about the football clubs, and they are essentially criminals in my view. They have gone to a business and come to drain it completely. And I think we took it, and it's quite sad that this is the line it's come to, isn't it? I think this isn't the last of it, and we know that, because these owners aren't going to suddenly care. They're not going to suddenly not want to make money. They're not suddenly going to care about the fans. Those statements were pathetic from maybe bar Arsenal. They were sorry for almost being caught in the act rather than being sorry for the act itself, and it's just criminal, isn't it? Like, these people have got to face punishment for this. You cannot come into our game and just change it for the sake of your bank balance.
as I said, they only apologised because people said no. As expected, they knew people would say no. They just didn't think. They just thought, oh, well, we have enough money. We've got enough power. We can shut them down. And they're only apologising because they were stupid and just didn't consider the fans and didn't consider the impact. And they've just been caught in the act, as you said, and that's why they're apologising, not because of any guilt on their part.
I think personally, it's more the fact that these are out of touch owners who don't understand the principles of the game and what it means to a normal person or a normal fan. Like, we look at the Glazers, for example. We look at like Perez. I think these are people that are very much out of touch with the game. Like, I remember the one thing that sticks out in Perez's statements recently was that young people don't want to watch football. They don't want to sit there for 90 minutes and watch a football game. I could name in sort of 10 seconds at least 10, 15 people that I know that will watch 90 minutes of a game twice a week if they could, go and play twice a week if they could, go training most nights if they could, because they love the game. And none of them are more than sort of 21, 22 years old. I think it's very much the reverse of what he thinks is what's happening, is that more people want to watch a game. I think on the issue is that, which we'll probably get into later, is people like Sky, that obviously like the cost of being able to watch football is increasing, and things like that. And it's the corporate side that is trying to kill the younger people's enjoyment, because I've got to go pay £800 for a season ticket that 2 weeks ago I didn't want, because I don't want to be watching us play Real Madrid every single week because it's not a special occasion. And I think whereas they see that to be a special sort of big highlight game, what was so special to me is I remember sort of 3 seasons ago watching us play Real Madrid in the Champions League at Wembley, getting to watch Ronaldo for like the first time in my life for a game that I've been able to go to, and that was a special occasion because it was the biggest team in the world, the best player in the world. But if you have that every single week, every single season, twice a week at least with certain players, it just sort of kills the special nights and the enjoyment of watching teams like that. And I think that's where these owners are so out of touch with the game and what it means to people that they thought one thing that will work, and it's just the complete opposite of what they thought.
I disagree in the fact I think they know. I just don't think they particularly care, and I think we have to get to the point now where enough is enough. They can't run clubs like this, and I know we've done it when we've talked about clubs lower down the pyramid, but in terms of this was ruining clubs everywhere. Like, don't get me wrong, Stevenage down the road would be affected by this, as would the other 14 clubs in the Premier League. It's just damn it. I suppose it's brought to light a lot of things because these are the bad guys, but they've always been the bad guys. And I think the fact of how UEFA have handled it has just proven it's bad guy versus bad guy. And there's no real winners. And right now, football's in a damaging place, and something like the Super League is seen as an option. Do I know lots of 16 to 24-year-olds that like football? Yes. Do I think less 16 to 24-year-olds like football? I think it's starting to get the way where there's a lot more distaste towards it. And the problem is because of those owners, because of ticket prices, because of what they want to do with these clubs. And then they go, well, where are they gone? Well, that's your fault. And I just think the biggest problem with the whole thing was the stupidity in thinking like everyone wants to see the best versus the best. Everyone wants to see a big game every week. Well, big games aren't big games if you play them every week.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just same old.
And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think a big thing to add to that is you mentioned obviously big game versus big game. Playing Real Madrid versus Spurs or Real Madrid versus Arsenal, which you know is a clear difference in ability, it's going to be no different to what like Spurs playing the likes of Norwich or the likes of Sheffield United, because we know them get turned over 9 times out of 10, and you'll get the one-off games where you'll sort of do a Sheffield United against Man United and you'll win like a game here and there. But as a Spurs fan, I would go into that Super League thinking we're going to get turned over by Inter, we're going to get turned over by Barca, Real Madrid, City, United, Chelsea, Liverpool. And the only team I'd ever see competing with is the likes of maybe AC Milan and Arsenal. And it's like, that is not enjoyable to a fan. If you're winning it, then yeah, it's great. But there's no enjoyment on the other side of it. There's no excitement of going to a game thinking this game matters, because like another point about the Super League is the idea that there's no relegation. We're secure each week, so we can go lose 4-0 to Barcelona, pick up our placement pay packet at the end of the season, which would be more than you get for winning the Champions League, and say, oh well, we've got the money, we'll go spend this money, do it again next season. Doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, that's another damaging aspect for me. If I'm watching people like Sterling and Ronaldo and Messi and all these just playing in a league where it's just it doesn't matter. It's no real different to playing a like bottom tier of a Sunday division. I don't understand what the appeal is there. the thing about football is that it's
I'd say there'd be more appeal in watching a Sunday League game with
there'd
a
be no
neutral.
VAR.
Being a neutral, you'd enjoy a Sunday League game. Well, not just that. You'd enjoy a Sunday League game between two really shite teams that you have no interest in whatsoever. Then you'd probably prefer seeing not the fact that you'd see Messi and all that playing against each other. It's not the fact that they are the players themselves, but it's just I don't know. I had a train of thought and it's gone.
No, I mean, fair enough. I think your whole point is
It nullifies the special feeling that comes with seeing these special
yeah.
occasions.
Just nothing good about a closed competition with like I don't get the appeal for players. I don't get the appeal for owners. Why do they think that is entertaining? It's because of the Americanization of the sport. Florentino Perez has clearly seen the game rising in these areas and thought this is the way forward. I think there was a rumor that there was going to be F1 type Drive to Survive Netflix series. Like, come on. Like, I know that is a stupid thing to focus on, but I think the big thing I always learned growing up when I was starting to watch football isn't a TV show, and it was kind of being made in the period that we know about, of course, the 2-3 days. It was being made into one, and I think the quote that stuck with me throughout the whole thing was, "Football is for me and it's for you, but it's not for the industry." And the more I thought about it, the more I realised how much we've swayed away from that since, not just since the Premier League come in, but since 2010. Well, if Qatar got the World Cup, like this, the same issues. Like we can go through so many issues. Why are ticket prices still rising? Like this is clearly because of the criminals owning our football clubs. There's no coincidence Germany didn't go into it. No German clubs didn't go into it because they're owned by the fans. There is not one person that wasn't an owner that wanted this. There just wasn't, and the complete disregard for that is worrying because ultimately, obviously, the protests were a massively good thing, but the reality of that situation is Chelsea would have had to like withdrawn like in the morning paperwork in terms of filing paperwork and stuff like this. The fans can't do anything, and that's really the sad thing. We have these owners in these clubs, and the one time UEFA need to act and do something, they bottle and beg for them to come back. This is the one time to show authority, and this just means we're going to end up back in this situation. This talk isn't going to go away. This talk has been existing since early 2000s,
2009.
Like, this isn't going away. Clubs want this. Well, no, sorry. Owners want this. And these types of owners are still here and they're still going to want to fill their bank balance. Real Madrid are still going to be in tons of debt. And we're just, right now, we're mugs to it. All of us.
I think
Everyone.
there's 2 points to raise from what you just said, and they kind of go into the same thing. And if you look at fans, you look at UEFA, the issue is that these big 12 clubs don't need the fans that they're currently, because no matter what, there will be a bum to go fit a seat. I can give up my season ticket, but there's a list of 15, 20,000. I'm a Spurs fan. I want a season ticket that will fill these seats week in, week out and support their team no matter who they play, what competition they play in, because they want to have the experience. They've been on it for so long. I was on that for God knows how many years now, since like a very young age, and so was my dad, and I managed to get one. And the one thing I've always been told is once you get it, don't give it up, because it's such a rare sort of thing to have, because you're
It's like the golden
It
ticket
literally
in
is.
the Charlie and the Chocolate
Exactly.
Factory.
And I got it perfect time to have. Sadly, I missed the season at White Hart Lane back end, but I had 2 seasons at Wembley, and I've got these seasons now at the new stadium, and it's a great experience, and I love it. But I could give it up for the principle of football, but there will just be another 20,000 people behind me just going, I'll just take it. It doesn't matter what I play, and I'll go spend 50 quid in the club shop. I'll go do whatever the owners need me to do to give them the money just so I can go to the game. And secondly, you've got 12 big name clubs that probably across the globe make up a quarter of the fans. Like, if you say these names, I think for 3/4 of people would not go, I know that team, I know that team, I know that team. Most of like the world in sort of the African community, like in Africa and Asia, I believe know the Manchester Uniteds, for example, or the Arsenals. So no, as much as the clubs need UEFA obviously to be in competitions, UEFA need these clubs because if they're not there, and you've got PSG, Bayern Munich, uh, Borussia Dortmund, and then your next sort of big team would be what, like Leicester. Like, that's not the same as thinking we've got a competition with your Manchester United, your Liverpool, your Chelsea, your Barcelona, your Real Madrid. It's just not got that same appeal. So as much as the clubs need UEFA need the clubs. So they can't really do a lot because they'll impact themselves through taking action on these clubs. And I think that is the biggest issue, is that we've got to a point where the size of these clubs are so big that they're now self sort of sufficient, and they say, we don't need you, we can do what we want.
This is the kind of thing. These clubs have the attitude now of, we don't need you, you need us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, we always remember the small things about football, don't we? Like the walk to the ground, you know, getting the same food, standing in the same spot, moaning to the same people, talking about it with the same Sunday league coach, with the same people at work. It's the small little things, and I think the value of all those now are just weakened almost when you say, obviously I can't speak as a supporter of a top 6 club, but I suppose part of that is weakened because your club doesn't care. The Glazers don't care about any Manchester United fan in the world. Enoch doesn't care if Lewis Connor comes to watch.
Should do.
Or Bill Gates. Do you know?
That is a great name.
Bill Gates. Right.
Yeah, but it's this kind of thing, and I suppose this is the issue, and UEFA have just gone, okay, you tried to leave, you're back now. And if they're not going to face punishment, I don't think. So it's
I'm pretty sure they've already announced that they won't face any further punishment, and were, as you said, allegedly paid to get back in.
This is
It's one other thing that annoys me about this whole thing. But like, I know we'll say about the top 6 fans. Obviously, they'll feel bad for them, whatever. But
me.
Well, some, because you are an exception. But I saw a couple videos of, like, say, sort of Liverpool fans, a couple Chelsea fans saying, "Oh, we shouldn't face any punishment." Like, obviously we're back in now. Whatever, like, I can't remember it exactly, but their argument was very flawed, and I don't think they. I think they failed to consider the amount of teams that have almost gone bust, as a result, been relegated through leagues, been sent, or been put into administration because of points deductions because of their mishandling with money, and obviously bending the rules, because I'm pretty sure trying to join a breakaway league, and there were rules in contracts which were being broken, which arguably could have made their contracts null and void. So if you're breaking those sort of rules and you try and buy your way back in, like, you can't do that down the pyramid. Why should it be any different? And I think a lot of people called those sort of fans out for it. But if you're one of those top six and you don't think that they should be,
Punished.
they should, basically anyone that thinks they don't need a negative points or any sort of punishment needs a reality check.
At this point, I couldn't care less if we just stopped them playing games. They don't care about the English football system. Why should they gain anything from it? Gary Neville was right. Why did we play the League Cup final? Two clubs who didn't care about competition.
I wish we didn't.
Two clubs that didn't care about the English football. Like, why? I'd stop talking about them on telly. Like, I'd be petty. I would go to extremes because they can't get away with this, and essentially they have gotten away with it. And right now they're sitting there thinking, well, we just didn't communicate it properly. That is what they are thinking. That is not the issue. The issue is the whole thing. A closed competition is wrong. Sacking off integrity for money is wrong, although that's happening already in football. It's just they've gotten away with it. Relegate deduct points, ban them from signing players, do anything, but doing nothing has just made UEFA as complicit as the clubs who have just signed up for it. They are,
Because they'll think, oh, in the future, if they get another offer to go into another and they get paid just as much, they think, oh, we can leave. We're not going to face any punishments. We're good.
in 3 years, this will come back up. It will. And then we'll be having the exact same conversation. And then they really are up shit's creek without a paddle. UEFA, that is. Because the clubs aren't scared. The clubs couldn't give a shit about UEFA. And UEFA, when they had the chance to show some authority as a leader to make them give a shit about the game, about integrity, about our beautiful league systems, have just weaseled out, and they're just as complicit as anyone else in my mind right now.
I think just going back to the point you made on obviously like the Sky Sports side of it, the issue is that they are not as bad, but they are in a similar boat because it's the same thing again of you're taking football from the people's game and you're making it this exclusive thing. In this case here with obviously Sky Sports, it's behind a paywall, and I think it was Jamie Carragher who openly admitted like Sky aren't much better, but it's also a case of again Sky need these big 16s to pull in these numbers to make their money because obviously they obviously obtain the license like the rights for the games and everything, so they need to make their money off of obviously like what they've already shelled out, for example, and all the money that they put in sort of like the start of the season. So for them to do that and this is the issue. And this is why I hate this side of football. And I 2 years ago I did a massive piece on it, Reece, didn't I? It's this commercialization of football, and it's such focus at like this top ingrained level, and there's so much money pumped into these sort of watching these top six teams week in week out that they just gone, you love us so much and you gain so much money from us that you're dependent on us, but we're not dependent on you. Linking back to what I said earlier, and it's just something that I hate so much, is that we have these it's the sense of entitlement. It's a sense that we are this big, so we deserve to have X, Y, and Z. We deserve to be in Europe every week when Spurs can't go and beat the team out in Croatia and they'll bottle a 2-0 lead and go lose 3-0 to basically an Orsic wonder show and in my opinion, a very good goalkeeper in Livakovic, as well as obviously some other players who like Zagreb, who honestly I think are a very competitive side. And teams like them, for example, why don't they deserve the right to be put in these Super Leagues? Because they've shown that they can beat X, Y, and Z team. And you mentioned Leicester earlier on, who have taken points from every single top six team in the Premier League. Why aren't they in it when they're clearly as super as these other teams? Because it's a sense of entitlement that we pull this much money for you and we do this, that, and the other because we're so much bigger and we have such bigger fan base that we are the sort of the gods of football as such, is that we run football, football doesn't run us.
Yeah, it's that thing of, well, where else are you going to get good football? Everywhere. Like, this is it. We got to bin off this idea. It's like when the Premier League happened and Sky Sports took over. People would just like going, haha, yeah, good one. I know that sounds a little like Lawrence McKenna there, but you
Your
you
favourite
get
person.
you get the idea in terms of every one of the big companies are like, yeah, good one. We'll charge people for the football because where else are they going to get it for all these big games? And suddenly we're in a period now where obviously every game's on telly. That's understandable, but the attraction is always with those clubs.
Mm.
It's just it's never been more abundant who runs football, and it's not UEFA and it's not FIFA. It's whoever brings the most money in, and I think this is the biggest proof we've had, and we need to wrestle back that authority, whether that go to UEFA and FIFA or that go to the government in terms of implementing a 50+1 rule. Obviously, we just spoke about punishment. This is an open question, but in your opinion, who specifically and what punishment should these clubs get, if any?
I see. This is the exact issue, and we've seen it with Dan mentioned earlier with points deductions for teams for the issues with owners. So there's been how many clubs in the English Pyramid that have had points deductions for sort of like poor, like even like bookkeeping. Obviously, leads to money issues and obviously all that fallout from there. And teams like going into administration, for example, and you get points deductions for it. But that is punishing a team at the expense of an owner. So what I think the idea that we should punish owners solely goes out the window, first of all, because that's not fair treatment when you have other clubs that have seen the full football club punished for the responsibility of the owners and those at the top. But then, secondly, you look at it on the flip side and you think, my first thing that I thought as soon as this came out and it was all resolved was ban them from Europe for 3 years. But you'll lose the UEFA
But then
Champions
I
League
think you lose.
loses so much sort of commercially. And again, they can't afford to do
I
that.
think. Sorry, go on.
Like,
Yeah, I think the issue is with that UEFA's whole panic was about losing these fellas from the Champions
exactly.
League,
And
and then if they ban them from Europe, that whole the same thing happens
exactly.
again.
It's like
Dan, punishment wise,
Yeah, I do get where Lewis is coming from because half the players didn't have excuse my French, but didn't have a fucking clue what was going on. We knew what was going on, they didn't. Like, they found out in the morning of it. Like, in the morning after it was confirmed. We're finding out on the go. They're being told as they come into training, as they go on Twitter in the morning. They're not being told by anyone upstairs. They're not being told by, well, they'll probably get, I'd imagine if you get told about management, but that would be when they come in, of course.
that goes in the Twitter chats, the WhatsApp chats rather, I think.
Yeah, like, then, like, as I said, the majority of them wouldn't have heard from people above them trying to explain to it. They've just made the decision, no consultation of players, and I think the backlash from the players themselves was obviously a major catalyst in it going wrong because it was some of the. I hope it would be. I'd hope it was. So I think it just took. It was obviously there was the odd one, and then Jordan Henderson came out. I think it was and he was calling all captains to get in a Zoom call and discuss it. And I think that was a big part of it because a lot more players were coming forward after that. Just realizing they have a voice and they don't just have to obviously hide behind their clubs. Obviously, a few didn't, but a few didn't before that. But that was a good starting point, and I. I don't know. I find it difficult because no players should really have to suffer as a result of poor poor
Poor
money
ownership. I
management.
think the issue.
Yeah, no players should have to, and obviously, as we see with Macclesfield last season,
No player did an issue there.
how
How many
yeah, and
clubs?
players took out mortgages. Players were struggling to get by, just like struggling to pay for petrol to get to training and stuff like that, and it's struggling with kids and etc. I don't know. It's a very difficult one, but it goes back to the whole thing of if other teams in much worse positions than them had to suffer.
Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, why shouldn't? What's the difference? Like they can recover from it. Those sort of teams can recover. They're not going to go into administration. The players aren't going to. I, not being rude, but they're not going to struggle near as much as. Obviously, it would affect them thinking, all our season's efforts has gone to nothing. But I'm not talking about particularly playing situations. I'm talking about financial situations. They'll be perfectly fine if there was any relegations because of it or exclusions from specific competitions or just any docked points which made them finish lower in the league. They'd still get millions. They'd still their wage would be the exact same. Nothing would
I
change.
think adding on from you,
I
Dan,
think.
So
Sorry, go
I
on,
was going
Lou.
to say just another thing, and this is where I kind of agree with sort of what you're saying, like the relegation stuff. The players at these big clubs have the value to the market in which they can get moves anyway. You will see the likes of Borussia Dortmund picking up players, Bayern Munich picking up players, PSG picking up players because they're in a financial position to do so, as well as teams like the Atalantas, for example, out in Serie A, who have got a good side and are missing one or two slight pieces from really becoming challengers. They'll see these teams that will be getting these point deductions or should be getting these point deductions and these relegations and this, that, and the other, and the lack of European football. And then they can just say, well, we want him. He's now looking to force a move because he's good enough to play Champions League football. He's good enough to compete for titles. He wants to win trophies, not sit this season at a sort of like a bottom end club. And even if you do it over like multiple seasons, for example, with punishments, which is what I would have liked to see, even for my own club, because that club isn't my club. That club is a team that I supported that is run awfully by owners. So punish us for all I care because we deserve it. We broke rules. We should be punished. So I don't even think financially players will struggle because they'll just find moves to other clubs.
yeah, and obviously be able to they'll move to other clubs, be earning just as much, if not a lot more. Not if not, in the majority of the
Exactly.
time, be a lot more. Um, and they'll still be able to find success at said clubs because they're going to get big moves because all the teams involved are the ones at the top of their game. Less spoke about Tottenham and Arsenal, the better. But the rest are in good situations. They can challenge. No, Dortmund haven't exactly like lit the world alight in the league, but they're still competing for Champions League at Tottenham. No, as they would you? I wouldn't call that competing at or Arsenal.
I th- I,
I
this
don't know.
is the thing. They've made this decision, which they then bottled, for money purposes. Why don't we just attack them where it hurts? Stop their profit margins, stop them getting players in transfer ban, stop certain in streams of money if you can, stop their cup money. They don't care. Stop it. No. They're not
They
allowed their
don't need
prize
it.
money.
They don't need to be in the Papa Johns. What are they going to do with 10k?
The prize money from the Premier
What's
League,
10k's?
put that
What
in the
difference is it
funds
going to
to
make?
go towards grassroots football or the Football League, which they clearly don't give a shit about. Like this idea that we can't punish these clubs because of, well, it's not the players and the manager's fault. Well, yeah, it wasn't Macclesfield's, it wasn't Bolton's, it wasn't Sheffield Wednesday's, and so on and so on. It wasn't Southend's. Do you know what I mean? And there's just so much. There was so much hatred for those 2 days of the thing football become. And right now, I feel like it's just easing out, and we can't let this go. This isn't fans versus European Super League. This is fans against the way football is
Football
going.
versus. I was going to say football versus
Yes, exactly.
the governing bodies.
Exactly. You did bring up the players, which brings an interesting point. Not many people agree with me, but I didn't like how quiet players were as a whole. I know there was a select group and the captains were meeting and the Liverpool players ended up releasing a statement, but that's when everything was falling apart anyway. Not enough people spoke up for me, and that includes management. Tuchel bottled it. Klopp, I'm really annoyed at, because he made his point, and then not only did he ruin it with Neville, he ruined it Saturday afternoon when he said everyone needs to calm down. No, no, we're not going to calm down. If this is the way football is going, expect a lot worse than now. Like, this isn't about calming down. This is about taking back our game. So for me, Klopp was not good at all. Fair play, Ollie, who spoke out against it and gave very vague answers when talking about the Glazers. Big up Pep. Big up Marcus.
Yeah, he didn't hold back, so.
Big up the other clubs that spoke out. Big up Marcus Rashford. And a few select others, but it was just all rather quiet. And considering these players were like, this is a breach of contract technically. If there was a time to not be quiet, it is now. Like, what? I'm uncomfortable with that lack of action there was inside the kind of game circle.
I think
If I don't know about you two.
I think the issue that I see, I do agree with what you say. I wasn't happy that this wasn't spoken out about by the players, but I also see it from the flip side. And these players and managers are going against their employers, basically. Who's the one that obviously pays the money for their contract? The football club. Who's the football club? Run by these owners, the Glazers, the Cronkies. I think the issue you have for people like Arteta is not had the best season. If he was to speak out of it, does he lose his job? How, like, no one really knew where they stood. Like, they stood with it. It was very fresh. I think Jurgen, to some degree, was able to speak out about it, but I think in the back of his mind, he knew the season he's potentially having, that is his job at risk if he spoke out too much.
Jurgen's protected. Can you imagine how much things would kick off at Liverpool if they sacked Jurgen?
Obviously, yeah.
Like, Jurgen's protected.
I think he is and he isn't to some degree. I think he is largely protected by the fans. I do agree, but I also think that, and there's been rumours in the past I never believed, but I don't know how much longer Jurgen may stay at Liverpool. I think that I don't know why. For me personally, I do see in sort of 2 years' time potentially a parting of the ways in which Jurgen does go on to take this break from football potentially, because a lot has gone on during this sort of pandemic with him. I know personally, with obviously what's happened with him and his family. I believe his mother passed away, and
yes,
I think a lot of things. And I've always said at the start of the season with Liverpool particularly that this was just a drop of form and that they will bounce back, and they have to some degree. I know obviously the recent result doesn't show that, but they're still just not firing the way they said when they used to be. And it does become a point of, if next season they don't get the same position, is it then time to part ways? This season is potentially a one-off, for example, but I don't know how protected he is currently. I think the only one I can see who is protected 100% is Pep, because I don't think you get a better manager than Pep. So that's why I think he has the ability to speak out about the Super League in the manner that he did and face no issues, because he's brought City to such a high position and elevated them from where they already were under the likes of Mancini, for example. And it's something that I just think he had that protection and the ability to do. And I think with certain players as well, you see the same thing, that in the back of their mind, they're thinking, what happens if I do speak out now? What is the owner's reaction? How set are they on this? Because it was all so new. And it came out obviously 48 hours that they weren't set out on it. And then we started seeing players coming out more when they realised that they could get away with it. With, like, so for example, Chelsea started to wither and sort of back out on City, and players then sort of came out a lot more and were open about it. So I think it was a case of they're more paranoid about their own jobs first, and rightly so, I think, because obviously it's your livelihood. You've got a family, you've got bills to pay because you've probably got X, Y, and Z houses and investments that you're putting money into. So I understand why on one side that they haven't, but likewise I would have liked to have seen it earlier. But it's very hard not knowing they're obviously their full position, because they won't come out and tell you why they didn't speak out straight away, for example.
Yeah, I get that. I think I'm just disappointed with the lack of. I know fans are in control, and that's great, and I think it's a good thing that we protested how we did and got the decision we wanted. But just the lack of general anger towards it in the game, within the game, quite upset me. And big up Bamford, who digged out UEFA for their dealing of other matters. There's another one I was going to make that escapes me, but it was in terms of it was all just very calm inside the top six camp, and I don't like that. Because it just shows to me within every board there's just not someone who gives a damn, and that kind of forces the issue more of implementing the 50+1, and this is kind of brings us into what we do now. Obviously, we touched on it earlier, of I forgot my point. We touched on it earlier about implementing the 50+1 and what happens now, because this will happen again. Like, we will be in this situation in 2-3 years' time. Super League isn't officially over, I don't think. Right now, Juventus, Barcelona, and Real are the last ones standing. But it's what happens now, because football quite clearly has to change. It has to. And this isn't talking about VAR, which that can change as well if it likes, and UEFA's responses to racism, which also needs changing. It's about clubs as a whole, because it is just a money-making project at this point, and these owners we can't let it happen anymore, can we? Obviously, 50+1 is something that's talked about. What are your two thoughts on the 50+1, or what do you want to see implemented to make football healthy again?
I'll let Dan take this one first, because I feel like I've kind of spoke on the last few points. So I'll let Dan have his little airtime currently now before I go on another rant about this next issue, because there's a lot of points and topics that I want to cover. So I'll let Dan get his words in first.
I'm you've put me on a pedestal.
Sorry.
Yeah, I am on board with the 50+1 thing. I think it would be, well, it's obviously a massive stepping stone forward, and obviously take football away from the evil that is above. And not to sound too superhero-y, but that's pretty much what it is. Yeah, it's not really much more I can say. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board with it. It gives football back to the fans, and I couldn't be happier about it. And I really, really wish it could. I don't think it will. I think very, very little clubs would, for the pure reason that it will take a while, and it will take money away from those above. and that I think they'll pay their way out of it in one way or another if they're able to own one of these clubs, top 6 clubs. Then, well, what is it, top 12 clubs? Quotations in the world. If you own that sort of business, you're not going to give it up for a couple fans that you clearly couldn't care less
Well,
about.
it's got to be government implemented, hasn't it? Once the government implement it, it's not a choice. But I think the worry is the fight against it, and also if you implement it for the top 6, I start to worry about how that trickle down effect, because I don't know how it works in Germany specifically, but I don't think the second tier Bundesliga, that's La Liga. The second Bundesliga clubs, I don't think it's enforced there. And I read a report, and I keep my eye on certain matters, and I'm not sure how the 50+1 rule works there. So maybe it's something you have to do when you reach the Premier League. I'm worried about how many owners step forward with offers if that happens. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Arsenal recently, but I think the issue is what owners do you start attracting if that's brought in, because who's going to go, here's all my money, I don't want any power. It's not really going to happen. So for the clubs that do need to be sold, which are all of those top 6 clubs, by the way, they need to be gone, all of them. There is no place for them anymore in the game. But yeah, that's the interesting other side to the 50+1 rule. Right, Lewis, go.
Well,
Enjoy.
what you just said, in the words of Rio Ferdinand, just get the fans together and just buy the club. Nice. It's a nice simple solution. I'm pretty sure Rio's got some spare cash that he can lend towards buying Manchester United. But that's a whole different debate.
Of course, all the fans should always buy the club.
So with the Bundesliga, I'm pretty sure it's throughout the whole of the football league, because for some reason I remember reading like Leipzig found a way to get around of it. So like I think they're controlled by like largely like the Red Bull board, because it was like the ownership, and then I think the original sort of hierarchy of the 50+1 sort of fan base of it was like mainly like employees of Red Bull or something along them lines. So there was there are ways around it,
isn't it? What's stopping owners getting people to pretend to be fans for the sake of, because it's not small amounts of money these clubs are earning. I think it was 425 million.
Yeah.
Just for entering the Super League. Like, it's ridiculous. Sorry.
And secondly, 1998, 99 was when this was introduced into Germany. And just in like the 21 years since then, the valuation and the commercialization of football has skyrocketed. So we've taken a platform that at the time, I think in terms of value of clubs and what you had to offer, you could have implemented that 20 years ago. For me personally, unless it is government mandated, like we mentioned, to be able to do that is very hard, I think, with the current valuation of football clubs. Like we're talking today, value of Arsenal, with the Spotify founder looking to take over with a background of the Arsenal legends, which I think from a PR perspective is an incredible move. To do that, it was like the valuation of 2 billion, but the Cronkies won't take anything less than 3 billion, and it's just ridiculous numbers we're talking about. So to government mandate and strip that back from the owners, whilst I think would be fully justified, you would have a whole list of issues that I think followed that would make it more of a sort of a pain for the government and for the Football League to go through than for it to be implemented. And we can't just do that at the top level. It would need to be throughout the full pyramid, because you can't just have it that a championship owner, for example, let's say of Brentford, takes their team into the Premier League, and next thing you know, he's lost half the control of his own club. That he's got to that stage. Like, that's not something that you can do to that owner in particular, who is doing it for the benefit of the club, you may think. And for example, like Leicester, the Leicester owner's done wonders for the community. He's done wonders for the club. He's invested really well. To take half ownership from him, I think would be horrible because the whole family and the tragedy around the family, and it is a family club. I'm not going to try and pronounce the family name because I will butcher it to high heaven.
Oh, please.
That's not happening. But like to do that to them because of these other clubs would be such a disgusting move that I don't see how it would work personally. In an ideal world, it is a great idea, and I love the idea of it. But there are just ways around it that we've seen, and there's exceptions to it. I think Wolfsburg is an exception with Volkswagen. I don't know the details behind that, but I know that's an exception to like the 50+1 rule, I believe. And there are just so many different ways and different issues that you would face that I can't see that coming in. And like I said, with the way football is going, it's just the idea of taking a 2.5, 3 billion, even more in the case like Manchester United pound club, and just going, yeah, we're going to cut you in half, in over half. There'll be so many legal issues that come from it and things like that that I can't see it happening.
I think a point I want to bring up about that is there's only one ownership group that I'm surprised that kind of did this break off, and it was the City Football Group, because they, if you actually look into them, they do amazing things for the area. They often support their manager. They don't interfere or anything like that. It's quite a well-run club, and obviously they were, I think it was well reported that they always had doubts. I think they were worried about being the really, really big fish in the small pond. So they felt forced into it, and I think it would be disappointing if, I know I just said they all need to leave, but for them, because I believe they always mean to do well. There are things that can be implemented in football, I think. 50+1 is a difficult one, because there are such extremes to either side.
You mentioned the City ownership, and I do agree to some extent, obviously, how great they are, and obviously you've got the background of them, and obviously the oil money and all that, and where all that comes from, and whilst they've done great things for football, and I know the City group, like I think the team in New York, is it New York City? And I think you got Melbourne City, and you got teams out in Africa, which you
Girona,
yes, Girona's done one. And you've got clubs all across the world that are linked under the City group. I do feel like that is also great investment into this Manchester City, because you'll get not only good experience like youth players going out there, and also vice versa, good youth players coming in. Because they took a youngster a couple of years, I can't remember his name, from Melbourne City into the Manchester City Academy because he was a young sort of starlet out in Australia. I believe this is correct. I may just be completely off my nut here talking, but if I remember correctly, there was a youngster out in Australia who came across the City, and I think they do a lot of good for football, but it also has the second, obviously, like the personal gain for the club. So it's a case of we'll get the best young talent in now rather than spend the big money for it, and then you'll spin them for a profit, for example. So there's always a flip side that every owner has the personal benefit for themselves. You wouldn't make a business move for the good of football without having the sort of the second side of it, which is the personal benefit from like the reinvestment. And that even comes down to likes of Leicester, like reinvesting into the training ground, for example. You know it's going to have an added benefit because it adds value to the club if they ever did come to sell it, which I don't think they will because of what they seem to be like, for example. But it is just one of them where the Man City owners, I think, are the best of a bad bunch, but still to go into it,
don't get me wrong, though, with the decision they made is wrong, and they should be punished for it still.
Exactly, it's just, I think they're the best of a bad bunch, but still no saints themselves. Like I said, they've done a lot of good for football, but I also feel like their nature is that they'll only do things for the personal gain. And I think anyone with two sort of sense together about the good of football wouldn't have gone into it. Like, I think if you asked the Leicester owners, for example, there would be no chance that they'd have said yes. because I feel like even though they are slightly lower side, I feel like they're a family that runs for the good of football.
You saw it with Everton as well with their strong statement, which was really, really good from them. For the good of the game, I'd like a levy on every penny spent over 100 million every summer, and that levy would be money going into grassroots and the lower leagues and stuff. So, okay, you can spend that money. I'm not against money being spent in football. That's not our argument. It's about it's about being over putting money first. Essentially, if you want to spend money to buy whatever player you want, that is sometimes it's annoying, but it is what it is. Like, I love watching Manchester City. But if we can put for every pound spent over 100 million, an extra pound has to go into a fund, that'd be really beneficial for the game and would put off owners being this money orientated. I'd cap tickets. There's been a long running one, tickets capped. I put all of the Champions League back on ITV, mainly because it was always better on ITV. And that, it's those Champions League nights that make you go, wow, isn't it? And we haven't really had that. I put the FA Cup, every single FA Cup game back on there as well, to help more youngsters get into football, essentially, because that's an issue. Don't get me wrong, Perez made good points about some issues of the game, just solving Real Madrid's day. Some of Real Madrid's debts was the reason for this, but he did make some solid points. I'd set tribunal fees for all under 23s because I think it encourages bringing players through the system, and although it is bringing money in for every player that goes for free under that age, I think it's for the good of the side because you'll be more encouraged to put money into the academy in aid for this. So as much as you're doing it to make money, you're almost doing it for the good of the club as well. And I just think it's small things like that that'll make the world of difference and make different people come in. But in the short time, it's all about getting these clubs in line. You are as equal as Brighton are. You're as equal as Watford are now. You're as equal as anyone. It is a level playing field because we can't be in this situation again. We've been talking for a long time about the Super League, so I will leave you to your closing kind of points about this, gents. Dan, me and Lewis apologise, I'm sure, for going on forever. But
I muted myself, being the very professional I am. So it's not my that's. Don't apologise.
What is your kind of closing point and general outlook on this whole situation that's happened in the past week or so, and how football goes from here, really?
Part of me sees it as a good thing in a way. Hold your pitchforks. I mean that it shows that the fans have a lot more. I know obviously a lot of money was involved, but the fans have a lot more power than they first thought. Obviously it will come back round, but that's been on show. 50+1 rule should be implemented, and if it's implemented by the government, ideal really. Will give a reality check to a lot of clubs and a lot of owners, I think. And I think I speak for everyone when I say this. Fuck the Super League.
best leaving point of an argument ever. Lewis, closing
Yeah.
points.
So I think the big thing for me is that we just need wholesale changes in the way football is run, from both just the background monetary side of it to the operational side of it. I think the big thing for me, the big changes I want to see personally is I think on net profit figures have a 5% grassroots tax, I'll call it, in which for every single club in the Premier League, for example, you take a 5% tax of their net profit figure. You basically take that away from them and you reinvest that into the game as a whole, which is the EFL Football League, as well as developmental programs around the Premier League, as well as grassroots football across like every country. I think for me, that way you'll see the Manchester United that will turn, let's say, 200 million will pay 10 times the amount of a Burnley that will pay 20 million. But it's a way of saying we've annexed ourselves at the top, so we need to give back somewhat. And I think the main thing for me is basically we can't let up. We've dealt with the Super League for now, but some people have failed to realise is that UEFA have gone and passed something very similar under our noses that ain't much better. All it is a slightly watered down version of the Super League with still the concept
Yes,
of
the
having
UCL reforms. Yep.
these based on merits. And whilst I think it's slightly better that these merits are based on coefficient rather than just founding clubs, it still gives this sense of you don't get what you deserve for your achievement in that season. Some people get more than you. For example, West Ham this season, if they finish in the top four and then these new reforms, if Chelsea finish fifth and they're the top club that's not got in, they get in as well. And it's like, but we've done everything we can to finish above Chelsea. So if we finish fifth, then don't we deserve that? So I think the big thing is just don't let up. Don't stop talking about the issue because it won't go away until we force it away.
Yeah, both of you have kind of summarised it perfectly there. I think the one
more slightly professional than the other.
No, fuck your Super League made perfect was a point made
Always
perfect.
been
It got the message across. That's
always
all
been
that
the difference
matters.
between me and Dan. I'm professional. He just says it how it is.
I think the thing I'd add is it once again emphasising it's not us against the Super League, it's us against how football's being run. There's so much wrong with football at the minute, with obviously constant abuse. There's a social media blackout soon. There's Qatar. Qatar shouldn't have a World Cup. There was proof of bribery, and they still have a World Cup. The Super League, the amount of power these clubs have. What I would try and force down is go to a club that values you. Don't let these clubs think essentially that you don't matter. In the best way possible, football on TV as a fan is horrendous to us English fans. We fucking hate football. Like watching football on TV, you would always rather be at a game. And the fans that go to games are the soul of the club. You are the soul of your club. And therefore, you do have some sort of role in how things are done. So, for this purpose, fuck your Super League, fuck your money, fuck your greedy, hungry owners, and yeah, those are, and especially once again, fuck the Super League. We are professional. Quite a different podcast.
Professional or not, I think Gary Neville. I really think he was wanting to say that.
Exactly. We are basically
we
Gary
speak
Neville's
on behalf
internal
of Gary
monologue.
Neville. We're Gary Neville's representatives. By the way, big up Gary Neville being the voice of the supporters over the past week or two. Quite a different podcast to how we usually do things. I felt this whole topic just needed, I know obviously it's a virtual, but sit around the table and just have a go at it. I'd have loved to have seen that rather than one of the big 6 games. Just get a load of pundits, go. So yeah,
No censoring, no nothing.
we will be a bit more structured, shall I say, in future. Lewis, solid debut.
Thank you.
Solid debut.
Do I get the shirt afterwards that I can hang up on my wall?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, the budgets aren't that high.
Get a few more listens.
And by that
Then
high,
we
I
spend it all
mean
on Sambuca
non-existent.
again.
I prefer not to comment.
Yes.
But the next Specialist in Failure episode, we'll be talking about our Premier League plays of the season. Will be a lot more structured, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more debate and a lot more, well, possibly a lot more swearing. Depends on everyone else's choices. Maybe Callum might even reappear for that one. But gentlemen, thank you for joining me to vent basically for an hour and 20 minutes. This is basically the point of the podcast, I feel.
It's been a group therapy session more than the
think so, yeah.
podcast,
I think every one of our conversations together is a group therapy session.
You need it more than most.
Maybe we should rename the podcast after that. And on
Football
that
therapy.
note, yeah, football therapy. On that note, you've been listening to Football Note. You've been listening to the Specialists in Failure podcast. See you sooner than the last time, I hope. Thank you for listening and see you soon.